Hello everyone, welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Paul Machin, sitting in for Chris Pajak this week, but of course alongside me is Josh Williams, who's going to break down Liverpool's win over Crystal Palace at the weekend. I think people were feeling quite nervous. I was doing the watch along for it, and me and Errol let out a noise that can only be described as the boiled down version of sheer panic at one point. But on your Substack you seem pretty happy with how Liverpool went about the win.
Yeah, well, going into the game, I found out that Liverpool's record against Palace, like past 9 or something, is really, really good. I didn't realise that. It always feels like it's tricky there, doesn't it? It feels like
Istanbul, mate.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's probably the last time they beat us, to be honest there, I think. But it feels like it's always tight, isn't it? It feels like it's always a close game, and I think they've got a decent coach as well. So going into the game, I didn't really know what to expect, and away games as well. I think Liverpool were the only team over the weekend to win away. Every other team doesn't. So going into it, I was a bit, I was kind of confident, but you never know what's going to happen to you at Selhurst Park. You know, it's that kind of ground. But
and of course, look, it's been mentioned and Slot was asked about it, the half-12 kick-off thing. We are sort of conditioned to expect Liverpool to have a struggle at that time of day. Yeah,
but I think looking at the game, looking at the way it played out and stuff, I think Liverpool won the tactics, which is always a nice thing. And I think Slot, so far, in my head at least, I don't know what you think on this, but I think he's painted himself so far as a bit of a tactician compared to, I don't want to say compared to Klopp, but compared to a lot of coaches, let's say, I think he's painted himself as quite good on the chessboard.
Yeah, he definitely looks like someone who was a student of that side of the game. It's a daft moment, but in the second show, which we're going to be doing on Redmen Plus, we're going to look at all the goals that Liverpool have conceded this season. The one in particular that I thought was really funny, watching it back, was in Milan. It cuts to Slot, and he just goes, it's like he looks at the spot and goes, and nods, and I'm like, he's gone, okay.
Yeah,
I'll remember that. We'll not do that again. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. And he seems to take it personally when people are out of certain positions and stuff. Whereas Klopp is a tactician. He definitely understands what the team are doing. But it always felt a bit like Pep Lijnders was the guy setting the deeper meaning behind the team, and he was helping that to sort of come to fruition. Whereas it does feel like this is all Slot's baby.
Yeah, well, I get the impression with Slot that he's a slop. I've just said bit of a mix between the two of them.
Which that might come back to. We might revisit that if things all go horribly in years to come.
Yeah, don't clip that, please. Let me away with that one. But yeah, going into the game anyway, this is how we've been accustomed to seeing Liverpool play so far this season. I think our formation's something like that. Now, we're not going to get into the formations chat because it is Arne Slot and he seems to take it personally. I would say personally that it's been a bit more of a 4-2-3-1 though for Liverpool.
Yes.
With Szoboszlai as a bit of a 10, and number 9 stretching the play a little bit, and two kind of connected midfielders with one sitting ever so slightly deeper than the other. In this game, I felt we adjusted that. And Slot has done this in multiple games where he's looked at the opposition and he's thought, right, how can we tweak this? I think Trent specifically said, game to game, he's teaching us, basically, if the opposition do this, you do this, and that sort of thing. Like against Ipswich, we recognised that they were pressing with a 4 really narrow, so we did that and just made the build-up much wider, made it much harder for Ipswich. In this game, we come up against a 3-4-3 system that Glasner's used that in every game so far this season. But when you have the ball and when you kind of pin them back a little bit, it looks a bit like this. So we can get up the first viz. That is kind of how you can make Palace's system look if you have the ball. So more of a back 5, bit of a straight line really, then a midfield 2. And then a front 3 that's kind of attached. Now, I think anyone looking at that, even the people who aren't particularly interested in tactics, would recognise a problem there. And it's basically, look at the midfield 2. That is a lot of ground to cover side to side. Yeah. There's not a lot of coverage there. So if we can move to the next viz, that's kind of what I'm touching on. Okay. The spaces either side of the double pivot is what you can use. And I think this is why Liverpool in this game, if you go to the tactics board here, seem to go towards more of a 4-3-3 for me. With, I think this was McAllister and this was Jones, Szoboszlai on the bench, Gravenberch doing the lone pivot stuff on his own. How did you think Jones played out of interest?
I really enjoyed Jones's performance.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those where, in hindsight, we were reviewing it yesterday on the podcast, and there's a temptation, I think, because he doesn't have the standout moments. It's a performance that people will forget with the passing of time.
Yeah.
But actually, in and of the game itself, I enjoyed how he played. And I enjoyed the versatility all over of how the midfield three play, because I agree. I think it was very early on. We were having conversations. Who's the 10? Who's the 10?
Yeah.
Well, there were situations during that game where McAllister was actually the furthest forward of the midfield, and there were times when it was Jones as well. So yeah, in short, Curtis Jones, pleased.
Yeah, well, we kind of played with 2 10s in a way. Certainly when we had the ball. I saw someone say recently actually that Jones is the kind of player who seems to play really well when the unit is playing really well, whereas when we're struggling, he's not maybe a Gerrard who'll grab the game and be like, right, I'll sort this out myself. He's kind of like is facilitator an insult? I don't want it to be...
No, not when you're on a tactics show. When you're in the pub, when you call him a facilitator, that's a long way, way of saying like somehow he's half shit. But
he's got a star.
I like that. But the thing about Curtis Jones is, I agree with that sentiment. One thing I know about him though is that it's more that his game doesn't change.
Yeah.
His game is his game, so he'll always be brave in possession. He'll always want the ball, and he'll always be happy to take a man on. That's almost independent of game state, but it's where he's doing that, and where is he being allowed the freedom to go and take control in decisive moments, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. So if we move on to the next viz, this kind of shows what Liverpool's 4-3-3 did to Palace. So there you can see McAllister kind of drifting wide a little bit, dragging, I think that's Adam Wharton with him. Jefferson Lerma is on the other side, kind of occupied by Curtis Jones. They're both playing between the lines. So if we look at that as a problem for Palace, I think if you're Adam Wharton, for example, you've got a lot of situations going on there. You've got a player behind you who's drifting into the space out wide when you're supposed to be a central midfielder, and it just caused a few problems for Palace. But if you go to the next viz, I think this one was interesting because this is the goal, and you can see the problem there that I think that's Munoz, Palace's right wing back, has, because of that narrow midfield two for Palace that are kind of occupied with the centre of the pitch. Once McAllister drifted out wide, you did have a bit of an overload there where Munoz is dealing with McAllister to his left and Gakpo to his right, and then you also have Tsimikas there, so you kind of had a 3-on-2 basically at the back for Palace. Munoz ends up caught between, doing both jobs. Tsimikas splits it open with the pass that he makes. It's brilliant pass. Gakpo gets on the end of it. He feeds Jota in the middle and Liverpool score. But I just felt that the kind of decision to use 4-3-3 with and kind of like drifting behind the Palace midfield too, and sometimes out wide and dragging them over there and stuff. Liverpool switch the play a lot. If you're switching the play a lot, these two lads are doing that all the time, getting tired and stuff. So I just felt the decision to use 4-3-3 compared to what we usually see in the first half especially had a massive impact on how Liverpool just dominated the game and structurally almost destabilised what Palace were trying to do.
I thought it was really interesting in terms of how Liverpool approached it, because the knock-on impact of this, and look, whenever you play down one side, the inevitable knock-on is that you'll draw the team over and you'll have more freedom for players on the far side. Now there's an ongoing you still see people complain about this. The ball to travel that distance means that you can often just get back over and cover. This was the German problem with 4-4-2, as I recall reading, that they hated the idea of 4-4-2 because they were so worried about people not covering the correct sides of the sides of the pitch. But what happens when we do this and these get dragged over here is that you could see it on the viz earlier, is that Trent then becomes another, almost in that sort of, there's almost like a line of three then of the midfield. So you've got McAllister, Curtis, and then Trent drifting into a sort of parallel sort of position with them, and then Salah. And what it led to was, for me, I thought anyway, was a number of situations where the dirty work was being done on the left, And then when the ball was arriving at Trent and Salah, they were in positions that they actually really wanted to be in and be on the ball to do the. And neither of them necessarily really did the business, but you could see how that was the sort of like the backup plan. If it doesn't work over this side, if we can't craft something, then we've got the opportunity to whip it over to the other and create something from there instead.
Well, I felt it was I don't know about you, but I felt it was a game where Trent did more traditional fullback stuff as opposed to the inverting stuff where he creates a box in the middle of the park. I felt he was he was there for kind of the whole game really. He overlapped every now and then.
Or got tackled by Mo Salah right here on the corner of the 18-yard box.
Yeah, but I felt like the kind of inverted movements for this game, again going back to Credit and Slot, he looked at this game and potentially thought, we don't need that from you in this game, we need you to do that. We have a back four defending there, and because we're using a midfield three, they're your front five. Whereas typically you'll have a midfield two there, and maybe it'll look like that with Trent like up here somewhere or something. So you've always got the five in attack, but the way in which that gets made up is different every time. But you've just touched on there, for some reason, well not for some reason, but in this game, I felt we really favoured our left, which you don't usually see. I felt usually Salah, Trent, they're really even Szoboszlai as well, really dominant players for Liverpool. But in this game, obviously the goal comes from Tsimikas, backup option. Gakpo again, backup option. But the goal comes from over there, and Van Dijk posts 117 touches. Then Tsimikas on 94, whereas Kanate was on 68. And Trent was on 84, so definitely a left dominant side. And
I guess I'm just looking at there, Gakpo's the most of the forward players as well.
Yeah, Gakpo's on 60.
And even because I was looking at the heat maps for this and just comparing Gakpo to Salah, and if you look at Gakpo's heat map, it is this lit up stretch, like Blackpool front, on the illuminations down the left hand side, and Salah is the street behind, where it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit shadier. There's not as much life, not as much going on, and that spoke to that again of like the build up play was being done down the left hand side.
Well, Salah was on 31 touches and Gakpo's 60. So that's, I mean, Salah comes off 20 minutes to go, but that's basically that's literally twice as many touches that Gakpo has, even though Salah's arguably the better player. And well, he is the better player, isn't he? And Trent is usually a more dangerous fullback than Tsimikas is. But just the way in which Liverpool played with Palace's formation, specifically the midfield two, and how they used it to their advantage, I felt was really interesting in this game. And it just goes back to Slot being, I think, apart from the Forest game, which was a bit mad, other than that, I think when it's been on him to present Liverpool with the solution tactically, I feel like he's came up with it. I feel like he's passing every test really with flying colours so far.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the only one where, as you mentioned, Forest being mad, it was a bit like, we tried like 3 different tactical things in that game. And they were all like variations on break glass, and not one of them really looked measured or practiced or studied, or they looked a bit like he might have learned something from them, and if nothing else, he probably learned, don't do that again. Maybe like that might be his takeaway, which is a fine one to have. If you're going to lose, you've got to have some learnings from a defeat, even if they're not necessarily huge sweeping ones. But no, I agree. The one that stood out to me when you mentioned the change of midfield shape, I think it was Man United, and he talked about Szoboszlai using him on the left of the midfield, which he hadn't been doing up until that point.
Yeah, well, the Man United game again, he goes to a 4-3-3 kind of. But I think the big difference with the Man United game was he plays McAllister here, and he uses Gravenberch as an 8. And I think that was just going back to the classic cliche line that Old Trafford is a massive pitch. I believe that. I don't know about you. I think the pitch is enormous.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
it is enormous.
Yeah.
So to have a player who can cover ground, get box to box better than McAllister can, basically say to McAllister, listen, this game, lad, you just sit, don't worry about it. And let Szoboszlai and Gravenberch do the running. Szoboszlai was dancing around players at times, wasn't he? And well,
in the amount of times Gravenberch won the ball back in this sort of area on the front foot as well, and then powered forward with it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but if you lose the ball here and you're Gravenberch, it's just a lot better to get back in compared to McAllister, who's probably out the game. You know, he's probably out the game if that kind of thing happens. So it's really subtle tweaks that I suppose the man on the streets or whatever won't pick up on, because it's still the same players on the pitch. It's roughly the same formation for the most part, but they're just really fine details that Slot is changing ever so slightly depending on who we're facing, and it's paying off so far. 9 wins out of 10.
If I had to push it at this early stage, Chelsea's the game when we come back from the international break. Let's say in hypothetics, we've got that midfield, you know, the main midfield three, as we've seen pretty much all season so far, which is to say McAllister, Gravenberch, and Szoboszlai. What structure would you be using in that regard? Obviously, Curtis could easily come into that. There'll be considerations for that, certainly. I don't if anyone knows watching at home whether he's on the 21 duty. I'm not 100% certain, but there's, as you said, we've seen a few different variations on the theme so far.
Yeah, it's tricky that. Chelsea have used 4-2-3-1 so far in every game by the looks of it. It is at Anfield as well. I do think at Anfield there's a bit more of a acceptance that we can just do us, I think. So I think we might just see the customary system, to be honest, where McAllister's a bit in between, Szoboszlai's there, and Joss is probably up here somewhere. But I'm not sure. It's the kind of thing where I'd probably have to have a bit more of a look at Chelsea and see what they're doing, see what the structural issues are there. But off the top of my head, I haven't done my own work, sadly.
Well, it's all right. It was unprepared. So that's why I put it on your toes so early doors.
I'm trying to think now off the top of my head of a potential Chelsea weakness, but I don't think I've watched Chelsea once actually, like a full game this season. So, but that's definitely potentially one for next week's deep dive.
Yeah, 100% on that. Is there anything more you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it for this week. But again, just like to praise Arne Slot. I think he's, as I said, like the job he's took, mate, is hard. He's replacing Jurgen Klopp, by the way. Yeah. And he's won 9 out of 10. But I think the crucial thing is Liverpool are winning, like, not in spite of him. Like, they're winning in some games because of him. Yeah. And I think, you know, deserves a lot of credit for that. Definitely. Well, there's some interesting points on this. Obviously, it hints at the defence as well. You know, Liverpool top of the pile, best defensive record in the Premier League. What we've done for the second episode is gone back through all the goals that Liverpool have conceded, and actually some of the biggest XG chances that they've conceded in games where they haven't conceded. The goalkeepers' saves, how much they've been involved in things, to sort of figure out whether this is by design or have Liverpool ridden their luck a little bit to get where they are. So yeah, do join us for the second show. We've got a special code for you guys. If you go over to redmenplus.com and use the code DEEP. Yeah, go deep. Why deep? Yeah, no, genuine. It was that or dive. Come on, Steve really pulled out all the stops there. On a Captain monthly subscription, you get 50% off. So yeah, you can come and watch that show for half price and get full access to the full whack of content in video and in podcast form as well. But yeah, I've really enjoyed going through Liverpool's game so far this season to see what's been going on. And look, I'll be honest, it's really good. It's really positive. So come and join us for a very positive deep dive episode 2 over on redmenplus.com.